بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد inshallah, continuing along. Last week we discussed the topics of basically trying to prevent the sin before it even occurs, and we said there was two main ways to do that. The first one we talked about last week, which is lowering the gaze. And does anybody remember some of the benefits we have from lowering the gaze? We said
it's like
we talked about
thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if like the look turns into like a thought or a desire, it like opens doors to more things that happen.
Yeah. One of the benefits of lowering the gaze is it prevents opening the window into the heart, which leads to more sins. Anybody else remember?
Like the other ones?
Yeah, we mentioned 10 main benefits when you lower the gaze. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you certain blessings or prevents you from certain evils.
There's the hadith من غض بصره من أجلي أبدلته حلاوة إيمانا وجد حلاوته في قلبه.
Lowering the gaze for the sake of Allah, Allah will put sweetness of faith into the heart. Also, it prevents the arrow of the shaitan. When the gaze, the sight, when you start looking at something that you shouldn't be looking at, it's the way for the shaitan to enter into the heart. So lowering the gaze prevents that arrow from being shot at you.
Also prevents.
Huh?
Go ahead.
Or it builds closeness like between the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
No, the lowering the gaze brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because as Allah says, if you leave something for His sake, He'll replace you with something even better. Right? So then we go back and review, inshallah, there's many benefits for lowering the gaze. That's the first one he talked about. That's a preventive measure of you falling into the sins, and particularly he's talking about sexual sins or sins of lust and falling into fornication or adultery, because the glance, the eyes is very dangerous in terms of leading to those type of sins. So the second path of prevention that we'll talk about today is basically the connectedness of the heart. So the Imam, he says, الطريق الثاني المانع من حصول التعلق القلب اشتغال القلب بما يصده عن ذلك. So the way to prevent your heart being attached to something that's sinful is to keep it occupied with something that's beneficial. So the more you occupy your heart with the love of Allah and the love of the Deen and the love of the Prophet ﷺ and doing good deeds, the more Allah will protect you and keep your heart from being occupied with haram. And basically he says, النفس لا تترك محبوبا إلا لمحبوب أعلى منه أو خشية مكروه حصوله أضر عليه من فوات هذا المحبوب. So a person, he never really leaves something that he loves except for something that he would love more. That's human nature, right? Like you're not going to leave something that you love, you have a strong relationship, unless there's something that's a better relationship or better love or higher love, right? And so that's a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He leaves the loves of the material for the love of Allah, which is the highest form of love. And this doesn't happen except with two requirements the Imam is saying. The first one is basira sahiha, or basically having the correct type of knowledge or understanding. Insight is a good translation. Having proper insight. بصيرة صحيحة يفرق بها بين درجات المحبوب والمكروه فيؤثر على أعلى المحبوبين وعلى أدناهما ويحتمل أدنى المكروهين ليخلص من أعلاهما وهذا خاصة للعقل. He's saying that the true insight, the true knowledgeable person, the one who has deep understanding, he knows how to differentiate between two types of love. So he picks the highest form of love over the lower form of love, and he picks the lesser of two evils. So something that he dislikes, he takes the lesser of it, right? That's the person the Imam is describing as the aql, or the one who has logic. And the second point is to have quwwat al-azima wa sabr, to have like a strong willpower and patience. قوة العزم والصبر يتمكن به من هذا الفعل والترك فكثيرا ما يعرف الرجل قدر التفاوت ولكن يبدأ له ضعف نفسه وهمته وعزيمته على أشياء لا تنفع من خصله وحرصه. So he's saying that basically the second point you need to achieve keeping your heart occupied with that which is beneficial, pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first one we said was what? Just keep me. You guys make sure that you're...
Good judgment.
Good judgment. Yes, insight. And the second part we said? Just
Azima.
Azima or sabr, patience. So the good judgment means you can distinguish between right and wrong, and if you have to do a right, you pick the highest form of right, and if you have to stay away from the wrong, you pick the worst type of wrong to stay away from, right? That's the good judgment. And the second requirement is to have willpower and patience, because he says many people, they have like the desire or the knowledge to know right from wrong or what's the best for them, but they don't have the willpower to carry through. So he's saying to achieve the goal, you have to have both of these, the insight and the willpower. And he quotes the ayat, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا لَمَّا صَبَرُوا وَكَانُوا بِآيَاتِنَا يُوقِنُونَ. That we made them into imams or leaders, being guided by our affairs, because they were patient and they had certainty. So Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah used to say, بِالصَّبْرِ وَالْيَقِينِ تُنَادِ الْأَمَامَةَ فِي الدِّينِ. With patience and certainty, you will reach the highest levels of the deen. So the Imam is saying this ayah encompasses having basira and sabr or azima. So you have to have insight and patience. And he says there are four major types of individuals. Those who have the insight and the knowledge, and they act upon it, and they benefit others with it. So they have the light, and they bring people to the light. And those who have the knowledge and the insight, and they act upon it upon themselves, so they have light for themselves, but not to other people. And the third one is the one they don't act upon the knowledge or the insight, and they are in darkness for themselves. And the worst of the categories is the ones that don't act upon knowledge and insight or do evil, and they call others to evil. So they are in darkness and they bring others into darkness. So these are the categories built upon the understanding of these principles.
Yes. Question: what do you say about someone that has knowledge and he doesn't necessarily act upon that knowledge, but he teaches it to other people? Because he's put into that position, and he's obviously not going to teach them something that's bad. So he teaches people the best of things, even though he falls short himself.
Inshallah, if his niyyah is sincere, like Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah and other scholars say that it's better for him to teach, because in that sense you're encouraging the good and forbidding the evil, even though yourself might fall short from it, right? Ibn Jawzi rahimahullah, he was one of the great imams. He was so effective in his speech that like one time I think 40,000 Christians became Muslim during one speech. That's how pure his sincerity was. Wallahu a'lam. And he used to say to his students, if you go to Jannah and you don't see me there, make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and tell him that I used to teach you something good, so maybe he will make intercession and bring me out, and bring me into Jannah. And this was a great imam. So sometimes even though the person falls short, but he still teaches for the overall good. And also he might get affected by his teaching and change his ways and become a better person. Now the Imam, he goes to Tawheed al-Mahbub, or making your love one. And we mean for the Muslims for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إذا عرف هذه المقدمة فلا يمكن أن يجتمع في القلب حب المحبوب الأعلى وعشق السور أبدا. So he's saying if a person knows these principles that we just discussed, there's no way that your higher love can for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be equal to the love of, like, he's saying sur, which means like paintings or pictures or idols, but basically anything from the creation, right? If you have this true principles and true love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you cannot equal it to the love of other creation. And now, the rest of the book from now until the end is basically the Imam talking about the principles of love and correct love, and what is love and how we love for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, والمحبة الصادقة تقتضي توحيد المحبوب وأن لا يشرك بينه وبين غيره في محبته. The true love entails the oneness of your love for the one that you're loving, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there should be no shirk or association of your love to anything other than Him. And this is like the highest form of love. This is the first commandment in the Bible and all religions, basically, to worship your Lord alone and don't associate partners with Him and love Him above all else. That's the true love. فليختار العبد إحدى المحبوبتين فإنهما لا يجتمعان في القلب ولا يرتفعان منه بل من أعرض عن محبة الله وذكره والشوق إلى لقائه ابتلاه بمحبة غيره. He said that so the servant should choose between the two loves, the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the highest form of love, or having your love attached to something else, because it's not possible to have them both. And whoever turns away from the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His remembrance and desiring to meet Him, then Allah will test him or give him a trial and tribulation and a fitna for that thing which he loved instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why the scholars, they say that if your heart becomes attached to something other than Allah, Allah will punish you with it, either in this dunya or in the akhirah. فَمَنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ إِلَهُهُ مَالِكُهُ وَمَوْلَاهُ كَانَ إِلَهُ هَوَاهُ. So whoever's God is not the king or the protector, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then his God becomes his own desires. As Allah says, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ وَأَضَلَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ وَخَتَمَ عَلى سَمْعِهِ وَقَلْبِهِ وَجَعَلَ عَلى بَصَرِهِ غِشَاوَةً فَمَنْ يَهْدِيهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ اللَّهِ أَفَلَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. He says, Allah says, do you see the one who takes his desires as gods, and Allah has led him astray with his own knowledge, meaning that person's knowledge led him astray, and he has put a seal upon his ears and a seal upon his heart, and he has covered his eyesight. So who will guide this person after Allah? Won't you think? Won't you ponder? أَفَلَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. So this is the one, he replaced the love of Allah with the love of the material. Then he talks about he starts talking about the uniqueness of worship. And he says, الحب مع الخضوع والذل المحبوب فمن أحب محبوبا وخضع له فقد تعبد قلبه له. The highest form of worship, he's saying, is to have love with humbleness. Like you love Allah so much and you humble yourself only for Him. And this is the highest form of love. And you put your servitude and your love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala above all else. That's why we don't bow down to anything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he goes into the levels of love, and he says, تعبد أحد مراتب الحب ويقال له التتيم أيضا. That servitude, worshipping, is the highest form of love. It's also called, it's like a form of worship or infatuation. Like you said, somebody, he loves a person or a thing so much that they worship that thing. Like the Prophet ﷺ, he said, cursed be Abdul Dinar. The one who worships the dinar, the dollar. He chases after the dollar. He takes the dollar as his God. Right? He loves it so much that he puts it above all other loves. So the mu'min, the Muslim, he puts Allah's love above everything else. That's the highest form. When you worship Allah truly with love and humbleness and fear and hope, that's the highest form of love, worship. After that, he starts going through the basics. He says that first love starts with a relationship. So that's the first level of love, at-ta'alluq. And from that, the next level, he says, is as-sababa. So you start a relationship with the thing or the person or the one that you love, and then you start getting closer to it. Sababa is the one whose heart is filled, like you sab al-ma, you pour the water. It's like you pour in love into the heart. The heart starts becoming filled with love for that person or that thing, and for us as believers, inshallah, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then after that, al-ghara'im or al-gharam. That's like the love that becomes an attachment. So relationship, then it becomes like pouring of love into the heart, and then the heart becomes attached to that thing or that person, or to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which we should be as Muslims. And he says, the ayah pointing out the linguistic meaning of al-gharim, inna adabaha kana gharama. Gharama is like attached to it. So Allah is describing the punishment of the hellfire as gharama. It's always like attached to that person, continuous punishment, not leaving that person. So that's also a form of love. When a person becomes the love so attached to what he's loving, it never leaves his heart. Right? That's the next level after that. And then it comes al-ishq. Al-ishq is like the passionate form of love. And this is not befitting to describe a person's love to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is usually like a romantic form of love that becomes to the point where it's too much. You know, like they say, Majnun Layla, the one who lost his mind because of his love with Layla. So he's saying another level of love, and it's not befitting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And after that comes shawq. Shawq means like longing. Like you can't be away from your beloved. You're always longing for your beloved. And that's how he's saying it's permissible for us to have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of the hadith he's going to mention right now. So الشوق هو سفر القلب إلى المحبوب أحث السفر وقد جاء إطلاقه في حق الرب تعالى كما في مسند الإمام أحمد رحمه الله. So this shawq is like a journey or a longing for your beloved of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it came in a narration narrated by Imam Ahmad where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made the dua اللهم يسألك بعلمك الغيب وقدرتك على الخلق أحيني إذا كانت الحياة خيرا لي وتوفني إذا كانت الوفاة خيرا لي. He says, Allah, oh my Lord, I ask you by your knowledge of the unseen and your power over the creation to let me live if the life is good for me, and to take my soul if death is better for me. Allahumma inni as'aluka khashyataka fil ghaybi wa shahada. Oh Allah, I ask for you having to have fear of you in open and in private. وَأَسْأَلُكَ كَلِمَةَ الْحَقِّ فِي الْغَضَبِ وَالرِّضَى. And I ask you to speak the truth in anger and in pleasure. وَأَسْأَلُكَ الْقَسْطُ فِي الْفَقْرِ وَالْغِنَى. And I ask you for steadfastness in poverty and richness. Like you're always the same. وَأَسْأَلُكَ نَعِيمًا لَا يَنْفَدْ. And I ask you for a pleasure that never ends. وَأَسْأَلُكَ قُرَّةُ عَيْنٍ لَا تَنْقَطَعَ. And I ask you for the pleasure of the eye that will never be taken away. وَأسْأَلُكَ بَرْدَ الْعَيْشِ بَعْدَ الْمَوْتِ. And I ask you for the coolness of life after death. وَأسْأَلُكَ لَذَّةَ النَّظْرِ إِلَى وَجْهِكَ. And I ask you for the pleasure of looking at your beautiful face. وَأسْأَلُكَ الشَّوْقَ إِلَى لِقَائِكَ. And I ask you for the longing to meet you. So this is the point of the hadith here. He's saying الشوق, which means a longing type of love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A believer, he always longs to meet his Creator. He always longs to get back to Allah and to meet his Lord. And he's not comfortable in this dunya until he gets there. And he says the hadith, من أحب لقاء الله أحب الله لقاءه. Whoever loves to meet Allah, Allah will love to meet him. And the Prophet also, or Allah Azza wa Jalla, he said in the ayah, من كان يرجو لقاء الله فإن أجل الله لآت. Whoever hopes for the meeting of their Lord, the Lord of the meeting with Allah is close. So the longing and the meeting to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the faith of a true believer. You know, that's his like attachment. He's not attached to the worldly things. You know, the worldly things can come and go, but his real attachment is to his Lord, his Creator. He always wants to get back to Him, to Jannah, right? To see Allah, to see the prophets, to see the believers, to be at true peace, true happiness, no more sorrow, no more sadness. That's the longing the believer has for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he says, لما علم سبحانه وتعالى شدة الشوق أولياؤه إلى لقائه وأن قلوبهم لا تهتدي دون لقائه وضرب لهم أجلا وموعدا للقائه وتسكن نفوسهم به وأطيب العيش ولذة على إطلاق العيش المحبين المشتاقين المستأنسين فحياتهم هي الحياة الطيبة الحقيقية. So he's saying that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he sees the longing and the desire of the servant to get to him, he gives him a beautiful life, a good life. And this is the true happiness in life. You know, because the Imam goes on to explain that it's not the worldly possessions. Because the disbelievers, they might have better lives than the Muslims in that sense of having worldly possessions and, you know, fame and fortune and all these type of things. But he's saying the true goodness of life, the true pleasure of life is to have that peace of heart and that iman, that you're comfortable with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the longing for Him alone. So the other, you know, temptations of the dunya don't affect you. And then he talks about the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where Allah, he says, ما تقرب إلي عبدي بمثل أداء ما افترضته عليه ولا يزال عبدي يتقرب إلي بالنوافل حتى أحبه فإذا أحببته كنت سمعه الذي يسمع به وبصره الذي يبصر به ويده التي يبطش بها ورجله التي يمشي بها فبه يسمع وبه يبصر وبه يمشي ولن سألني لأعطينه وإن استعاذني لأعيذنه. Basically the famous hadith that a servant doesn't get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with something more beloved to him than that which he has made obligatory. And he continues to draw closer to Allah with the nawafil until Allah loves him or loves her. And then he becomes the sight with which he sees and the hearing with which he hears and the steps, the hand with which he stretched forward and the steps with which he walks with. And if he asks Allah, Allah will give him, and if he seeks refuge in Allah, Allah will protect him. And then another narration, it says, and the servant dislikes death, and I dislike to disrupt the servant. I dislike to make the servant uncomfortable. But it is something that must be. Death must happen to everybody. And the Imam, he goes on to describe how the death is actually good for the believer because he gets to meet his Lord. So, in this hadith, the Imam says, Allah has basically divided that which will bring his love into two categories. Doing the obligatory deeds and doing the extra deeds, the nawafil. And the most beloved to him is the fara'id, that which is obligatory upon you. So always focus on perfecting your farida most importantly. The salat al-khams, the fasting Ramadan, the zakat, the hajj. And then you continue to do the extra good deeds so that if you fall short in the obligatory deeds, it makes up for it. Right? And the more you perfect your obligatory deeds and the more you do the extra deeds, the closer you get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until you can achieve this great gift from Him.
How does one balance between his fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his sins and at the same time his longing to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Like someone, he's scared of meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not that he doesn't want to meet him, it's just he's scared of his own sins. So how do you balance between those two?
Well, you try to remember and have husn al-dhan billah, good thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that His mercy precedes His anger. And then, like Ibn Qayyim says, you try to be, like the bird. Basically, the head is love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the wings are hope and fear. So you keep yourself balanced between hoping for Jannah and fear of the hellfire, and your motivation is love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for your good deeds. And there's a famous hadith that's one of the Arabi, he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, Mata sa'a, when is the day of judgment? And the Prophet ﷺ, he gave him a question to, that you could do action with. Basically, he said, ماذا عددت لها? What did you prepare for it? And the Arabi, he said, I didn't do much of deeds and stuff, but I love Allah and I love the Messenger. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the person will be with who he loves. So if you really sincerely love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and love the Messenger ﷺ, and act upon it, then inshallah you will be with them on the Day of Judgment in Jannah, inshallah. So the Imam is going to go forward and explain the levels of love and what types of love are permissible in the highest forms of love, and the love of the family and the wealth, like the natural form of love. It's something different than we're talking about right now. Right now we're talking about the love that is reserved for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you cannot have any partners with Him in that. But the natural form of love, as long as it doesn't take you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's permissible, like love of family, love of friends, love of food if you're starving, or love of drink while you're thirsty. These types of loves are natural loves that are okay. But your main love, the worship form of love, is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And the highest form of iman, when you get higher, is that you don't love or hate anything except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake. So your family is obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they worship Allah, you love them even more for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The food that you eat, you say that inshallah it can make me stronger to worship Allah and get closer to Allah, and that you do it with that niyyah. It's like you make your actions all for the sake of Allah. That's the higher levels, and you get more rewards. Just about this hadith to explain, he explained it in Arabic in great detail, the benefits of it, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes your hearing and your eyesight and your walking and stuff like that. he said he didn't say talking, because subhanAllah, like these are the actions that people do naturally without even thinking about it, right? But talking is something that you have to think about and do to come out, the words for you to come out. So he's saying if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to protect you in these, He will protect you from that as well. And also he makes a distinguishing, saying that, you know, no creature in the heavens and the earth can move or see or hear without the permission of Allah. But this hadith, he's showing the ma'iyah that Allah has, the being with the believers. It's a special characteristic and attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's a special gift to the believers only. This is a special, you know, allowing you to see and hear and walk and, you know, put your hand forward to only that which is halal, and to protect you from the haram. So this is he talked about it in more detail in the Arabic language, but it was really beautiful point. And he says this ma'iyah, the oneness or the being with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the accompaniment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are mentioned in many ayat, and it's for the believers only. لا تحزن إن الله معنا. Do not grieve, verily Allah is with us. وإن الله لمع المحسنين. Allah is with those who do good deeds. إن الله مع الذين اتقوا والذين هم محسنون. Allah is with those who have taqwa, God consciousness, and those that do good deeds. واصبر إن الله مع الصابرين. Be patient, Allah is with those who are patient. So the Imam is talking about in this hadith, Allah being the sight that you see with and the hearing with which you hear, and the hand that you put forth and the foot that you step with, is Allah being with you and protecting you from going into the haram and helping you to do the good deeds, right? And you become from the awliya of Allah that are protected. And if you ask Allah, Allah will give to you. And if you seek refuge in Allah, Allah will protect you. And like I said, the mu'min, he dislikes death, as Allah says, and Allah dislikes to disturb the mu'min, the believer, you know, because of all the good deeds he's doing in the earth. But he said death is necessary, it happens, and for that we go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because we can't go to Jannah without dying, right? You can't feel the blessing of health without being sick. You can't truly realize what it means to be healthy and thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unless you've tasted the pain of sickness, right? You can't truly appreciate richness unless you've experienced poverty. And the Imam is saying you can't truly appreciate the Jannah or life until you go through death, because a true life doesn't start until you die, right? That's when the real life becomes. And we'll stop there. If there's any questions or comments, Jazakumullah khairan.
There's a way to translate the book in English, right?
The ones that are out are not, like, that one is not complete. It's pretty nice translation, it's not too bad, but it's not complete.
Oh, okay.
And this one is like complete, but it's a very poor translation. And I heard a friend of mine, actually, he's translated a good translation, mashallah. He's a very knowledgeable brother. So I'm waiting for him. I asked him if he could send me
He's finished
a copy. It's finished. I think it's getting published now.
Nice,
But that would be a good book to have. And inshallah, you guys learn Arabic too, so that would be even better. You can read the original language, inshallah.